Duopharma Biotech is set to play an important part in the government's vaccine procurement program, but some are questioning whether the private sector should even be involved at all. We asked Group MD Leonard Ariff Shatar this very question, along with the company's plans post-COVID-19. So Duopharma has, of course, signed a deal with Russia's RDIF for the supply of the Sputnik vaccine. But the thing that interested me, Leonard, was the option for technology transfer. So what is the current state, actually, of your vaccine business?
I mean, our primary consideration for 2021, obviously, is to satisfy our commitment to the Malaysian government. But in parallel, we're also working with other companies in regards to vaccines. A Taiwanese company for two particular candidate vaccines and a US-based company for another vaccine. But none of those are expected to go into clinical 3, at least for another 3 to 5 years. So that's the reason why we approached the Malaysian government to say, yes, we do have fill and finish, but whether or not we choose to fill and finish will depend very much on how fast you want the vaccine in. Because if you introduce fill and finish, it's an additional step and that may delay. So what we're doing in the initial period is actually supplying to the Malaysian government the finished product from Russia. But having said that, in our term sheet with the RDIF, what is actually included is the possibility of technology transfer for manufacturing. So we're evaluating the manufacturing option, but as you're well aware, the biggest issue with the pharmaceutical industry in Malaysia is very difficult for us to achieve scale. Self-sufficiency is easy, but if you achieve self-sufficiency but insufficient scale, then you become globally uncompetitive.
Now, you've been in this business for a while. Do you think doing deals like this means that you are offering people a choice when it comes to their vaccines?
I think that, and this comes back to the question of choice, the government will not allow private sector vaccination for phase 1 and phase 2, but potentially for phase 3. Okay? The reason for that is they need to ensure the most at-risk percentage of the population is protected, first and foremost. So any vaccine that's been approved, if it's available, the government will probably want to actually acquire those to vaccinate the highest at-risk population.
Is that ethically sound, though?
There are counter-arguments when you talk about private sector availability of vaccines, because remember, one of the primary considerations of Ministry of Health is accessibility. Now, you have to ask yourself, ethically, is it correct that just because you can afford it, you should have, be put forward in the queue to somebody who happens to fall under the B40 category as well? So that's an ethical dilemma that I'm sure the Ministry of Health is actually debating internally. And of course, there are compelling arguments to allow private sector to participate in vaccinating their own, because you still have frontliners, bank tellers as an example, people who deal with people, old folks, nurses in private aged care facilities, etc., etc. So for every one person that's vaccinated by the private sector, that's one person less that needs to be vaccinated in the government sector. So there's a cost-saving mechanism there as well. And obviously, in terms of travel bubbles, we want to restart the economy. And part of restarting the economy is re-establishing business travel, between countries.
Why does the government need to go through a private sector at all? Why can't they just buy vaccines straight from the makers?
I suspect when it comes to certain companies, the government will deal directly because they don't see the possibility of any value add that these companies are prepared to offer Malaysia. Okay, but for those companies that they believe technology transfer can occur, they're prepared to work through an intermediate body like Duopharma and some of the other companies that have been selected in order to get a value add component for Malaysia. Because ultimately, the government is at the moment seeking views on a national vaccine, not vaccination, a national vaccine strategy for Malaysia. Because what this COVID-19 has actually highlighted is there is a huge risk in being reliant on other countries to supply you the vaccines. So what very early on in the discussions, when we had discussions with the representatives from the government of Malaysia, we were looking at how do you ensure that this doesn't happen again? Because if you look at SARS and then you look at MERS and then you look at COVID-19, this period between potential pandemics seem to be getting shorter and shorter. Okay, things are cropping up now.
How overall will the vaccine business actually change Duopharma in terms of earnings? Will there be a dramatic shift in earnings breakdown?
Obviously, the supply of vaccines to the government will disproportionately increase our supply to the government in the near term. And should the economics on putting up a facility work out, then obviously the scale of Duopharma will be very different moving forward. Because if you look at the costs of vaccination today, and just take the budgeted cost, which is 3 billion ringgit. Duopharma's revenue at the moment is approximately anything, 600 to 650 million, PBT of approximately 70 million. Now, the vaccine business, as far as the COVID-19 vaccine, if you take the government numbers, it's going to cost 3 billion. Okay, so for every 10% that you vaccinate the Malaysian population, that's going to be 300 million. So if I put up a facility and supply to, let's say, the government 30% of the population, assuming the government still wants a multi-vaccine strategy, that's 900 million revenue. On a company that's only doing 600 million revenue today. So yes, would the COVID-19 supply change the company? Yes, it will in the near term. But should we decide to go into manufacturing and the government support is there and we're able to provide self-sufficiency and there's a need for continual manufacturing of a COVID-19 or variant vaccine, then yes, it will change the entire what Duopharma, compared to what Duopharma is today. It will change tremendously.